So one of the things that we had two readers actually submit similar ideas. Sherry Alexander and Pio Del Castillo both had an idea. Sherry said that she sees so many hotel and citizens walking around Addison that a trolley or some sort of bus system connecting the smaller places that are a little farther than walkable distance would be good. And Pio actually also mentioned an Uber-like app where people could book a shuttle from where they are, or even a Segway or bike station being an option, some way to get people a little farther than walking distance from one side of Addison to another. So wanted to hear the panel's thoughts about that idea.
I'll go first. I love those ideas. I mean, those are great ideas. Anything that can improve transportation and reduce our dependence on parking and parking garages, I think is a great idea. And I think Richard alluded to this earlier, that we do have a parking problem. Detroit has a parking problem. I'd rather have our kind of parking problem where we have too many cars than not enough cars. So the challenge is, how do we manage that in a productive way and where it doesn't lock us up in some form or fashion? And it's going to take some creative thinking, because people are officing differently. They're using office space differently. They're using restaurant space differently. So it's going to take some good ideas like that we try out and experiment with.
I think that really goes along with what we've all been talking about, the new millennials, and they have a different way of living, and that is a reflection of that too.
Absolutely.
Do you,
Quick.
in Addison Circle, I just can only imagine you already have public improvement districts in place. Do you have PIDs in place?
We do not.
I mean, that's just off the top of my head. One of my comments would be to the readers is that might be something to look at. Is, you know, when cities can't get something funded, or there's just not enough money, the private developers can always come together and create that for the community. And that's one of the things, you know, we talked about Clyde Warren Park. They just created a PID by the ownership that's around Clyde Warren Park. So not all of downtown Dallas is in that PID, but everybody that's right around Clyde Warren Park created a PID, and that the Arts District PID, and that PID is helping to pay for all the programming that's happening in the park. So one of the ways to create that and make it a more walkable, livable, bike-friendly community, and you guys have some pretty substantial office users that are there that might even be a sponsor of the bike share program that you could start, and then the PID money helps to fund that. It just might be something interesting to look into, whether those users are interested in creating, because obviously they have to tax themselves in order to create that. But it could be a way to, I'm sure it's something you guys looked at, but it certainly could be a way to help facilitate.
Well, yeah, I think it's great. I mean, you start with something as bikes, e-frogs, you know, those kind of small shuttles. And maybe it evolves into something like some kind of a trolley or system that loops around through Addison and connects to Addison Station one day. Sure, let's go back there. But I think that you have probably, I'm going to venture to say, 7 to 8 million square feet of office space in the Addison area. Okay, so I was estimating conservatively, but I figured it was going to be up there. I mean, 3 million square feet just north of Beltline alone, Class A. That's not, you know, all the other that's just right on the tollway. So you start to multiply the numbers in there. You're talking, you know, let's say 25,000 people during the workday that want to go have lunch at the 100 restaurants that are along and around the area, probably more than that. But you know, you start alleviating some of the people who are coming from Addison during the day and from all of the you know, residences in and around Addison at night. You start at least take them out of the equation, so that the parking for people who are coming from Frisco or Carrollton or, you know, south of us, you know, you start to take the numbers of people that could just take some type of system around there. Right. You alleviate that, and they stay parked where they are, where they live, where they work, and they don't encumber the parking at the retail establishments and the entertainment districts.
Well, from a historical perspective, in the early 80s, Addison did have a trolley. And it was reasonably effective. But again, 30 years later, we're all much more accustomed to that sort of transportation. And because parking is more difficult, much more viable. Great idea back then, much better idea today.
Well, the arts district that you referred to, I mean, the trolley line now, you might know this, but it's connecting through from McKinney now all the way back up through downtown, you know, and up pretty good bit south of the Deck Park and the arts district, even what we would call that's in the arts district technically, and then coming back around and down past the Deck Park again and connecting to McKinney.
There are always people on it, you see.
And that's that. I think that will get a lot of ridership and as the critical mass of folks living downtown.
And one of the sponsors of starting that PID was Crescent Realty Group, and so you know a lot of the times what it takes is finding that one property owner that has a critical mass to basically be able to economically prove from a financial perspective that the increase in tax burden is going to be offset by the increase in rental rate, right? And so that's, you really have to, it all boils down to the numbers. And so, you know, the citizens want the amenity. You have to basically prove financially that amenity translates into increased rental rates and increased cap rates, basically, or I should say decreased cap rates, increased sales price. So, you know, if you can find that champion, if you will, who's one of the real estate owners or predominant real estate owner to help to push that through, you don't need 100% buy-in in order for the city to enact and create a PID. You only think you need 51%. So, you know, it's a real interesting way to kind of go about achieving something as you look to potentially find a funding source.
Can we talk to you about it?
Sure.
As a big developer?
Well, we would start
Fun
by
to
getting
try.
one of those things they have in Uptown where everybody pedals and drinks margaritas at the same time. So
It's good. One of the next things with a couple of reader submitted questions have to do with a little more with the resident services and people who live here. And really it kind of ties into people who come and visit and play here as well. Teresa Rhodes said that she would love to be able to canoe or paddle boat down the creeks in Addison and North Dallas. I'm thinking of White Rock Creek, maybe even in Vitruvian Park through the creek there. She also mentioned maybe an indoor aquarium or bird exhibit with street entertainers and craft kiosks similar to the Promenade in Santa Monica in the Post area. And then also Wendy Roush said that she would like to see a dog park built in Vitruvian Park to make it very similar to the Clyde Warren Park dog park and seeing people gather. So what are some resident services ideas like that we could see as beneficial to the area?
well, we hear that a lot at Vitruvian. We have 70% of our 1,150 homes that we've built thus far have dogs.
Whoa.
And so we have a lot of dogs over there. And of course, you're going to have that when you're living adjacent to a 12-acre park. That will attract dog owners and a good trail system to boot. So we have a lot of that, and we've put in a city dog. We found a good vendor off the West Coast to come in and do a pet venue for pet boarding and grooming and things like that. And they're doing great. They've been a great amenity for us. So to do a dog park, that's a little bit of a different thing. I think of the one at White Rock Lake, a lot of maintenance, a lot of land that has to go into that. So, I mean, if there was something that we could do with Addison on a public-private basis, I suppose we'd take a look at that. But we kind of think of Vitruvian Park as a bit of a dog park, but you still have to keep them on a leash. And so,
Isn't there a dog park very close to them?
There's
one right
actually
here.
Addison is one of the, again, not surprisingly, innovative, creative community that we are. One of the first places to have a dog park. Utilize some utility easements, and we have actually two. And to Fran's point, we're looking at another, taking a currently underutilized regular park. It's actually called Addison Town Park, next to some apartments immediately north of where Tom's development is, and just south of kind of all of the court streets over there, Blueberry Court and Dove Court, immediately south of those, and possibly reconfiguring that and splitting it in half with a dog park in one half and then keep the rest for kids and families. We actually are doing that study right now to see if that's feasible, both from an economic standpoint and then a user standpoint. You don't want to spend money on a park or a dog park and then no one
Nobody
uses
does.
it. So we put a dog park community or committee together last year that came up with that recommendation. So we funded a study, and we'll probably get the results of that in the early spring, maybe as early as February or March. approach and see where we go with that.
You don't just use the "if I build it, they will come" approach. The study first.
Well, the challenge with that, and Tom really alluded to this, the value of Addison real estate is such that it's very difficult to just scrape off a piece and say it's just for your nice dog.
Non-revenue.
not a big revenue generator.
And that's the question of being able to paddle down the creek. Pray for rain, and maybe we can. Right now, it's just a trickle.
Yeah, I have an answer also to that question that I've actually looked into it. I'm an avid kayaker myself. Obviously, we don't have anywhere to go whitewater kayaking in Dallas, except now on the Trinity River. So there are a couple of places there that this individual asked the question could go to. As for all of the creek systems, that's never going to happen. And the main reason is because those are all storm area runoffs. And so you can't keep a constant level of water in there, because then there'd be nowhere to go and all of our homes would flood in the North Dallas Addison area. It's the same reason why we couldn't create a Lake Austin type thing between the two levees. So if you go back into the archives of Dallas and you look in the 1800s, downtown Dallas basically flooded like every week, the entire downtown Dallas. And so those levees were literally built so we could have a downtown Dallas. And so, there's only so many things that you can do from a civil engineering perspective. And unfortunately, very unfortunately, in my perspective, that's not one of them.
Well, aside from the fact those creeks go through a whole bunch of tunnels, which I would not want to be stuck in my kayak.
Yes, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff here. We're going to move on to another area. This topic actually got brought up a couple of times. Marsha Walden brought this up. Sherry Alexander also brought up something along the lines of, they both brought up specifically the Trinity Groves concept and the development going on near downtown. Bringing in a cool foodie idea. Marsha specifically talked about doing something like that on Inwood, which we've discussed a little bit, and even mentioned possibly doing a farmer's market. And Sherry talked about even having it overlook the airport, and that kind of ties in. Todd, you talked a little bit about making the airport a little bit more prominent. That could kind of also tie in.
Right. It's interesting to hear people talk about Trinity Groves and a restaurant incubator. And when I look over at Richard and think about the 170 restaurants that are in Addison, I look at Addison and go, Addison's a restaurant incubator. We are one. 4.2 square miles, and we have new restaurants come to town, and then 22 years later, they're an icon not only of this community, but of the restaurant business. What better example? So not that I would discourage us from taking an underdeveloped piece of property and thinking creatively about it, and maybe an incubator or whatever, but we already have that, and we're pretty well. I was on a mayor's conference or a panel last week, 3 other mayors, and they kind of looked at us and go, yeah, we want to do what they're doing, talking about Addison, because we've got that, and thanks to people like Richard and
part
others.
Of branding again. We don't call it that. It's just another restaurant open, ho-hum. And so I think that's a great possibility to create some
Addison opened 20 new restaurants in the last 10 months.
Nobody knows that.
Huge number.
Well, the entire restaurant community nationally knows that, because anybody who's trying to get financing and wants to do a national rollout knows that they have to come to Dallas, because we have one of the highest per capita areas that actually dine out on a weekly basis. And if you cannot make it in Dallas, you're not going to make it nationally. So, yeah, I mean, really, I think nationally, I mean, that is, to your point, you think about branding. I mean, that's really something to build on.
Yeah, and call it something, and I don't know what, but think about it.
Sure.
We have at Vitruvian looked at it on a casual basis, doing a Trinity Groves type of concept. We've got a building on Marsh, south of Tom Thumb, north of Callaway's, that other than one lonely Pizza Hut is sitting there vacant. Older building, would take a lot of capital to put into it to make it operational, but it's got 100-foot bay depth, so it's really not viable retail anymore. And so we thought about doing that. We thought about doing an art kind of destination there too, and ultimately as we penciled it, it made sense for it to be scraped and rebuilt one day. But we have talked through those things from time to time.